and welcome back to the Football Show. We're now joined on the line by Italian football writer James Horncastle. James, how are you keeping?
Yeah, very well, guys. How are you doing?
And it's good to have you back on the show when we're, a few days away from the start of Serie A. And Dan and I were just saying, it just seems to have a bit of a buzz that hasn't really been there for probably the guts of a decade now.
Yeah, absolutely. Last season, I think, was the most compelling for a long, long time because the title race went into May. All the other title races in Europe's top 5 leagues had kind of been wrapped up by Christmas time. And there was still everything to play for going to the final day. Champions League places, Europa League places, who stayed up, who went down. But of course, Juventus signing Cristiano Ronaldo, who's not just the best player in the world along with Lionel Messi, but one of the most famous people on the planet, brings a lot of eyeballs, shifts the spotlight back onto Serie A. I think another component is that the Milan clubs both seem to have got their act together as well. Inter look like the most credible challengers to Juventus this season, and AC Milan have undergone more change in the summer, but change for the good, with Leonardo and Paolo Maldini coming back into the mix, and they've made some good signings as well. So a lot of positives around Serie A for this upcoming season.
Yeah, and you wrote a lovely blog on ESPN and you spoke about Ronaldo, and you said the longing for Serie A to return only intensified once Cristiano Ronaldo signed for Juventus. That he chose the old lady and Italy was a huge compliment, a gesture that encouraged the optimists to think that this is the most significant step yet in restoring Serie A to its former glory.
Yeah, I think there's still a long way to go because in some respects this summer has been the good, the bad and the ugly in Italian football. The good being the signing of Cristiano Ronaldo, and as I wrote, the fact that he chose Juventus and to play in Serie A. But also we've seen this summer, Parma get promoted, which is a great story. A lot of romantics love that. But there was the fear that they would get relegated because one of their strikers had sent all these WhatsApp messages to a player on another team who played for their rivals in this promotion-clinching side. So it seemed that they were in jeopardy of going down before they'd even kicked a ball in Serie A, but they will still be there.
What was that about, actually?
What was that about? It's an interesting story because Emanuele Caleo, who's a striker for Parma, he sent one of the players for this team called Spezia a WhatsApp message, which to paraphrase was essentially, "All right, mate, go easy on us on Friday or Saturday night." I can't remember what it was.
And he didn't mean on a night out.
Lots of emojis, and Caleo hadn't been in contact with this guy for quite a while, so the Spezia player went and basically told teacher on him. And this all came out. The Italian Football Federation launched an investigation. Initially, Parma were given a 5-point penalty, and Caleo was banned for 2 years. But they've since appealed. The points deduction has been completely thrown out as well. Caleo's got a shorter ban; it's been reduced, and a fine to pay. But again, this goes to show that one of the kind of key components to the drama that Serie A produces is controversies like these.
Yeah, because they never seem to be that far away. You know, I suppose they're frequent enough. Betting allegations and so on. And I was just saying, Dan, before we came on air, I've spent a fair bit of time at games in Italy, including in Parma, and it's a beautiful place. But I just think there's more incentive kind of to go back to watch games in Italy now than there has been for some time, really.
Yeah, I mean, James, I think you posted a picture last week. I think it was like a traffic jam or a queue, I think, going like 4 to 5 hours before Ronaldo's debut. I mean, is that sort of indicative of the interest levels and how they've soared?
Yeah, I mean, we already saw interest kind of increase domestically last season. Ever since Juventus moved into that new stadium, which isn't new anymore. It's been open for 7 or 8 years now. They've always been able to sell out or have 95% capacity. But we're really seeing fans coming back to other clubs, and I think that one of the reasons for that was how competitive last season was. Everything was still to play for late in the game. But also, I think the Milan clubs, we saw Inter. I think they had the highest average attendances in Serie A last season, which is only fair when they play at San Siro. But I think a lot of television spectators, particularly in England and Ireland, would watch some Italian games and say, look, why so many empty seats? Yeah, that's not really as much of a factor anymore. We saw it in Rome when Roma went on that incredible run in the Champions League to the semi-finals. Incredible atmosphere and packed houses at the Stadio Olimpico, which I think people were used to seeing when they tuned into Channel 4 Football Italia in the 90s. Lazio as well, being in the mix for qualification for the Champions League in the final day. They were playing in front of a full house as well. So, and also, like, as you mentioned, some of these promoted clubs that either haven't been up for a while, or in some cases ever. The atmosphere at those clubs is great. If you went to watch a game at Spal last season, who hadn't been in the Serie A for like 50 years, atmosphere was incredible. And I imagine at Parma, now that they're back after 3 straight promotions, the atmosphere at the Ennio Tardini on Sunday will be really something to behold.
What's the ticketing situation there, James? Because from my own perspective, it was quite an elongated process just to go to games in terms of having to have your passport and all this. And I felt that there were some kind of incidents a few years ago, I think, where a fan was maybe killed on the way to a game. And it just seemed that this sort of rigid kind of, I suppose, what was now a really strict kind of security measures across the league sort of seemed to influence attendances, as well as the fact that the game was probably a little bit on the wane over there.
Yeah, there was a high-profile incident in 2006-07 when a policeman was killed at a Sicilian derby between Palermo and Catania. And that was really seen as the final straw. And what we saw was fan ID cards were introduced. And they were the source of some controversy, certainly among a lot of ultra groups, but also your normal match day going fan who wanted to bring friends, family to the stadium. Because having one of those, it was almost like you were being criminalised. But to some extent, those measures have been relaxed. We've seen owners from other countries invest in clubs and obviously want to make ticketing and access to stadiums that much more easier, not just for fans who are local, but those who are coming from abroad, tourists. So the likes of Roma and Inter have made major kind of advances in that regard, which I think have contributed to both of those clubs seeing a real kind of a boost and a spike in attendances.
I mean, James, you speak about maybe tackling a perception there, and another interesting point I think you reference is the goals per game in Serie A, which is something which I have sort of noticed that in recent years. It's sort of gone up somewhat, but I wasn't sure of the stats. And as you mentioned, I think it was 2.68 goals per game in the supposedly faster, looser Premier League, but the Serie A ratio is the same.
Yeah, exactly the same. And I think, the reasons for that are that I think they recognise, given that the league has this perception problem, which you mentioned, that the way to bring in viewers or to bring in fans is to play exciting, attractive football. But I think also that we've got a generation of managers who come through. Remember, 19 of the 20 managers in Italy are Italian. Wow. They're all influenced by Arrigo Sacchi and his AC Milan team in the late 80s and early 90s, which were quite un-Italian in that they played very attacking football with a high press. His football very much influenced Guardiola as much as Cruyff's did. And you've got also new managers where the world's a lot smaller these days. Their exposure to other leagues and other philosophies and other playing styles is so much greater. And so they're taking bits and bobs from what Guardiola's doing or what some other like Thomas Tuchel's doing, Jurgen Klopp's doing, and bringing it mixing it into their own kind of what they're taught. Italy's training school in Coverciano. So you are getting some you've got great tactical diversity, but attacking football. And to be honest, the strikers are really benefiting from it.
Yeah, and I guess we had a perception a bit over here as well that, the money had basically found its way towards England and Spain. So the powerhouse clubs in Italy now, do they have that financial clout that, could restore them to former glory, which you mentioned in your piece?
Look, I think one of the issues for Italian football over the last few years is that they had a Champions League place taken away from them. There was only 3 Champions League places, and the third one, you had to go through the qualifiers, which, given Serie A's season starts a lot later than some of the other leagues, meant that teams were often going into those qualifiers undercooked and would get upset and kicked out before the group stages began. Now having 4 Champions League teams and guaranteed to get into the group stages means that there's more money around with the top clubs, that they can do their transfer market a lot earlier. For example, the team that used to finish third, they would wait until they'd qualified for the group stage before spending any money. And when they didn't make it, they didn't spend any. So now that money is guaranteed, teams are a bit more ambitious, a bit more bullish. And also, throughout all of this period, Serie A has always had the second biggest domestic TV deal in Europe's top 5 leagues, because, like in England, they had a rival for Sky. So just as Sky had BT in the UK and Ireland, in Italy they had Sky and Mediaset. So they've always had loads of money from TV, but where they've lagged behind the Premier League and some of the big elite European clubs is in terms of like attracting sponsors, commercial deals, getting big kit deals as well. So there is a hope that with the exposure, the greater exposure that I think Ronaldo will bring, that some other investors will be maybe keener than they've been in the past to put their money into Serie A. And I think that's why when the Ronaldo deal was announced, not just Juventus, but certainly people in the press in Italy were willing to push this idea that everyone will benefit from Ronaldo being in the league.
Sure, and I remember, Dan, obviously years ago when we used to watch the Italian football on Monday nights, because there wasn't much football on TV then, and it was on, I think, every Monday night, and Italian football was quite big in Ireland because we'd so little access to much
huge,
else. But I think this could be a turning point, because if you look at the Juve team with like Emre Can has gone there, Ronaldo's gone there, you have like obviously you've Cuadrado, who we saw in the World Cup, and now there's even talk of Modric perhaps going to Inter. It's almost like this could be a turning point in terms of Irish people's interests.
Well, except it's going to be on 11 Sports, which is going to be a bit of a challenge.
Yeah.
But I mean, you mentioned, James, just in terms of the Modric situation, is there any sense on how viable that might be? I know there's obviously a Croatian gang at Inter already, and maybe that might be part of the attraction. I know there's tax elements as well. Is there any sense on where this one is going and whether it's a runner?
Yeah, this is a runner. Inter have certainly been encouraged into thinking that Luka Modric would like to come to Inter. They wouldn't have dedicated this much time and basically abandoned signing Arturo Vidal. Barcelona did come in for him and sign him, but I think Inter could have got that deal done earlier had they not been encouraged into thinking that Modric was a goer. I think the problem is that Juventus, after signing Cristiano Ronaldo, have created the situation at Real Madrid where they feel, the president feels that he doesn't want to lose face. After losing Ronaldo, after losing Zidane, losing a player like Modric, who was crowned best player at the World Cup, and will be a big contender for the Ballon d'Or, come January or whenever that is announced. Losing him would be too much, I think. But this is something that I think Inter will be chasing down right until the end of the transfer window. But I think now, given how late it is, it's going to be very difficult for them to get this deal done.
I liked Luciano Spalletti's comment about just the team that he's kind of put together as Inter, where he's like, I'm in the changing room with people I would have chosen even if I was playing on a computer game. It's kind of a nice way of putting it. But let's talk preview, actually. I mean, if you want to talk like expectation, obviously Juve are like overwhelming favourites to win the league, but is it going to be that cut and dried? And I guess are Inter kind of the main rivals, or are we going to look at Napoli? Obviously AC Milan are really very much the fallen giants, but how do you see it actually going? Is it going to be a one-horse race?
Well, it wasn't last year, and I think that's encouraging. I think what's ominous for the rest of the league is Juventus have signed, obviously, one of the best players of all time in Cristiano Ronaldo, and all of their signings are not just there to kind of give them more depth. I think they improved the first team, bringing Leonardo Bonucci back, for example, Cancelo, the right back, who had a very good year with Inter last season. So they look actually better than they did a year ago. And the team that pushed them all the way last season, getting 91 points, Napoli. Maurizio Sarri, the new Chelsea manager, he made them look greater than the sum of their parts. He had them punching well above their weight. They had the 5th highest wage bill, and you wouldn't have thought that because they matched Juventus for much of last season. Even with Carlo Ancelotti on the bench, I think he's got a really tough job stopping them regressing. So in terms of contenders, I look at Inter because I think Spalletti's a very good manager who's got a track record of winning silverware in Italy. He's won the Coppa Italia on a few occasions. He won the league in Russia. He knows what it takes to go deep into a campaign. But they've really made the most improvement with the signings that they've made so far this season. Stefan Di Vrij is one of the best centre-backs in Serie A. They got him on a free. Nainggolan, they brought Keita Balde-Diao back to the league. He went to Monaco last season. He was someone who scored 16 goals as a winger for Lazio in his final season there. And they've got this kid who's Argentinian called Lautaro Martinez, who I think all of the top clubs in Europe wanted. But they were able to exploit the relationship that they have with the sporting director at Racing in Argentina, who's Diego Milito, who of course was their striker who helped them win the treble in 2010. And he's looked really special in pre-season. I'm picking Martinez to be one of the breakout stars of Serie A. So I think Inter will be the team that pushed them hardest. Milan actually did very good in the second half of last season. They reached the Coppa Italia final, and their record after Christmas was the 3rd best in the league. All they were missing was a goal scorer, who could put away some of the chances they were creating. And in Higuain, they've got the striker who scored the most goals in the league in the last 5 years. So that's very encouraging for them. They've also got the back line, which is the future of the Italian national team. In the goalkeeper, Gigio Donnarumma, the new captain of Milan, Alessio Romagnoli, and the guy they got from Juventus as part of the Bonucci deal, Mattia Caldara, who Juventus were really conflicted about letting go because he's seen as the best defensive prospect Italy's produced in a long time. So, I think it's fantastic that the Milan clubs look competitive again and look like they can do something. But if a challenge comes, I expect it will come from Inter.
What's your 1, 2, 3 then?
1, 2, 3 would be Juventus, Inter, and then I quite like what Roma have done in the transfer window as well. Roma obviously reached the semi-finals of the Champions League last year. They've got their manager is into his 2nd year, so he should be more confident, and I think his ideas will have been more assimilated with some of the players that they've got there. But they've made some really interesting hipster signings, if you like. I mean, they've got Patrick Kluivert's son, Justin.
We all want hipster signings, don't we?
Yeah, they've got Javier Pastore, who comes back to the league after spending a long time with Paris Saint-Germain. Steven Nzonzi signed yesterday, and they got this kid Brian Cristante, who is again the future of Italy's midfield. Scored a lot of goals from midfield for Atalanta last season. They've got all these kind of wonder kids that if anyone's played Football Manager, they're like, oh, that guy's meant to have a huge future, we should buy him. And Roma practically bought all of those players. So it's going to be really interesting to see how they get on. They might be a little bit young, a little bit raw, but there's certainly a lot of potential in that side, a lot of upside going into the future. And
just lastly, does the name Ryan Nolan mean anything to you?
Ryan Nolan? No.
Yeah. So this could be, Dan, Ireland's somewhat return to Serie A, a 19-year-old Clare-born guy who's at Inter Milan.
Yeah, he's at Spain. He moved to Spain when he was 8, and then he moved to Inter Milan.
But he's Irish. We're going to claim him.
We are claiming him. But he is actually
basically
Irish.
James. We want Irish players to because we're not making much of an impact in England. We want them to wipe the floor somewhere else.
We want James to watch the Inter Milan reserve side and tell us the next time he's on how he's getting on,
and tell us if Ryan Nolan is the next big thing.
He's the new Liam Brady, I hear, and that's why Inter have gone and signed him.
I suspect the next time you're on, you'll know a lot about Ryan Nolan.
Well, look, I mean, I'm going back and forth to Italy at the moment.
What a great country, by the way.
Oh, they're wonderful.
You know.
But I will, if I can, I will see if I can interview him. And also, I'm in Verona for Ronaldo's first game this weekend, where
against Chievo.
Yeah, exactly. Where Liam Henderson, Scottish midfielder, he's playing for Hellas Verona in the second division. He moved there in January from Celtic, and did really well under Fabio Grosso, who was the manager there. Obviously, helped Italy win the World Cup in 2006. Grosso's moved to Hellas Verona, has taken Liam Henderson with him. So, there's quite a lot of players who. Look at Chelsea. Some of the guys they've had on from their youth system who've been going out on loan either to the Championship or to Holland. You've got Boga, who's gone to Sassuolo. Ola Aina has gone to Torino in the last few days. So there's quite a lot of interest, if you like, from either a Premier League standpoint or from a British and Islands standpoint as well.
James, great to have you on, and enjoy your trip to Italy at the weekend. Make sure to tweet a little photo of Ronaldo.
Okay, I will.
Top man.
Cheers, guys.